India has passed the presidency of the G20 group of leading economies to Brazil. As the summit wrapped up in Delhi, heads of government issued a joint declaration against the use of force, but they stopped short of condemning Russia over the war in Ukraine.
Many world leaders joined Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to walk barefoot to Mahatma Gandhi's memorial site and pay tribute to the hero of India's independence movement. The summit of the G20 group of major economies wrapped up after reaching consensus on a host of issues. The concluding statement did not condemn Russia for the invasion of Ukraine, but it did stress the territorial integrity of borders, whereas last year the joint statement condemned the invasion explicitly.
With almost all these Western countries, the G7 countries, India has very strong strategic partnerships. So I think they did not want to, ruin our presidency by insisting on this thing. And I think we succeeded in persuading them to tone down some of the harsh language that they had wanted in the final declaration.
The African Union also joined the G20 group as a permanent member during the two-day summit. The bloc of 55 countries now has the same status as the European Union, increasing the representation of the Global South in the G20.
So I think there was always a sense that there is a sense of imbalance in the G20 as it was built with the induction of European Union there. And that imbalance is beginning to be corrected. The second part of this is shifting the balance away from the developed world to the concerns of the developing world.
The new declaration also vowed to tackle debt vulnerabilities in low and middle income countries. Leaders also backed a drive to triple the world's renewable energy capacity by 2030. Closing this year's summit, Narendra Modi passed the ceremonial gavel to the Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who now takes on the presidency to host next year's meeting.
Our Delhi Bureau Chief Amrita Chima has been covering the G20 for us, and she joins us now from the Indian capital. Hello, Amrita. Now, the consensus in Delhi has been praised by many, not least Russia, but Ukraine was left disappointed, wasn't it?
Yes, Anya, Ukraine was disappointed, and that was because the language used in this declaration is viewed by Ukraine certainly as being much weaker. In the Bali declaration, the G20 said they deplore in the strongest terms the aggression of the Federation of Russia. And this time, as we heard, that Russia's name wasn't mentioned at all. But that then was the price of consensus in Delhi. Now, we saw that, praise has come from all sides, and that is interesting, praise from both sides of the political divide. Now, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, said that he praised this summit as a breakthrough and said India was able to check the West. And the West also praised India and said they were satisfied with the outcome. For the German chancellor said, well, Russia was given a very strong message. And President Macron said, from his perspective, Russia was completely isolated at this G20 summit. So as you see, India was able to play a bridge between the two sides. And interestingly enough, India said that this was only possible with the support of other emerging economies, specifically Brazil, Indonesia, and South Africa.
OK, so apart from Ukraine, Russia, there were, of course, other significant outcomes from this G20 meeting, weren't there? Can you tell us more about them?
Yeah, absolutely, because at one point it seemed that the Ukraine issue would completely derail this summit and overshadow all the other very significant outcomes. As we heard that the African Union has now become a permanent member of the G20, and that makes obviously the organization much more representative. Then we had another very major project, an economic corridor linking India with the Middle East and Europe, and that's supposed to will enhance trade, energy, and digital connectivity between the regions. We also had a biofuel alliance which was signed, and that is targeting that green energy would get a real boost. And apart from these three significant developments, there were a host of other issues which focused quite clearly on the emerging economies like debt reduction, financial inclusion, better access to health. And that was very much in keeping with India's agenda of being the voice of the Global South.
OK. Amrita, you mentioned the African Union now being brought into the G20 fold. Going forward, how different will the G20 be after this summit in India?
Well, absolutely. Having the African Union has obviously made this organization more representative. The G20, when it was founded, was always viewed as a group of rich countries. And that, under India's presidency, has seen a shift. We've seen the emerging economies playing a much greater role. And as you know, that the next presidency is taken by Brazil and followed by South Africa. And they are likely to actually push forward with India's agenda, which was agreed on this year, as well as what was agreed by Indonesia in the last presidency. So I think we'll be seeing a shift in the balance within the G20. And obviously, next year when the meeting gets together in Brazil, it will not be G20, it will be G21.
DW's Amrita Chima in Delhi. Thank you so much for that.